Well, I'm just returning home from the Wooden Boat Show out in Mystic, Connecticut. Now, if you missed the live announcement, Steve from Acorn to Arabella announced that I will be building the tender for his beautiful boat, Arabella. On my way back, I stopped in Granby, Massachusetts at Steve's boat yard. Now, while I was there, he loaded me up with all kinds of boat building materials that I'd be able to build the tender out of. So some of the things that he gave me are some old growth mahogany, Honduras mahogany, some tamarack knees, and over on my trailer there's some pine, black locust, quarter sawn white oak, 100-year-old white cedar planking, and more mahogany. Now, the majority of the materials that I'll be using for the tender came from a Atkins boat, Victoria, which was a 32-foot cutter, and it was built in 1926 to 27. About 5 years ago, Steve purchased the boat Victoria with the intention to reuse the bronze and some of the materials in the building of Arabella. I'd like to invite you to watch or rewatch his episode 21, Our Lady Victoria, where he talks about the boat and how he's going to reuse some of those materials. Since the majority of the materials to build the tender will have come from Victoria, the tender will also bear the same name, Victoria, in honor of that grand vessel. Well, I've got a good portion of the materials organized, but I'm still going to need to find a place to store the planks and a good handy place so that I'll be able to get to them easily. But let me show you some of the mahogany and some of the special pieces that I've gotten from Steve. So let me look at this first. So this is some 3/8 inch tongue and grooved mahogany that looks like it's, I would say it's about almost 2 inches wide. This was used for the ceiling of the cabin in Victoria. You can see I've got quite a bit of it here, and what my plan is to use this on some of the bulkheads that will be in the tender. Really gorgeous, gorgeous wood, and I'm pretty excited to dig into it. Clearly I've got a lot, so there may be some other projects that I can think of to use it for. The other exciting thing that came from Victoria are these tamarack knees. Oh, I've got quite a few of them here. It looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knees. So these are beautiful knees. You can see how the graining, they're growth knees, where the grain runs in the corner that you want it to be. They vary in thickness. This looks like about 1.5 inches, and I think the thickest one is down here on the bottom, and it looks to be, I would say, maybe 2.5, something like that. Now, Steve ran these through the planer, so you can see how the grain has come out on it. One of the things that I will probably do is I probably will resaw them down so that they'll be closer to 3/4 inch thick. And I'll probably only be using a smaller section out of them than instead of the whole thing, because it just won't require that much. But I'll put the knees in where the thwart, the center seat is. There are some knees there. I'll use one of them for the breast hook, and then I'll also use a couple of them at the stern where the in whales and out whales come and meet there. So anyway, I was pretty excited to get these. They're really beautiful, and as you can see, I've got a lot here. I probably will be able to use these in future projects as well. Now there's also, I've got a whole bunch of mahogany. So the mahogany over here, you can see these curved pieces right here. These were the beams for the cabin roof. They're all mahogany, so I will be able to use parts of those in the tender as well. And then I've got some big chunks of oak here that obviously did not come out of Victoria, but were pieces that Steve had left over from building Arabella. Some really beautiful quarter sawn oak that I'm sure I'll be able to use. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was the stem that Steve gave me. So the stem is also solid mahogany. And when I saw it, it sat like this in the boat. Like I said, solid mahogany. And in the art world, we would call this a ready-made, in that it's already a beautiful piece of sculpture without really doing much to it. I think what my plan is that I'll get the paint off of it and maybe plane it down a little bit to expose some of that beautiful mahogany. And but I'll probably leave some of these kind of rough parts in here so that you can kind of tell where it came from out of the boat. And I've got another little piece there on the floor that is also a part of the stem that perhaps I can use as a base or something like that. But anyway, that'll be a future project, a little ready-made sculpture from Victoria. So those are some of the special pieces that came out of Victoria. Now I'll need to reorganize my storage rack here so that I can store some of this mahogany up in there so that I can get to it easily as well. So let's take a look at some of the plans and talk a little bit about some of the parameters that Steve has set out for me to build this tender. Well, I've pinned up two construction drawings of two different boats here. Both of these were drawn by William Atkins. Now that's important in that, as you'll remember, that I said Victoria was designed by William Atkins, and also Arabella is designed by William Atkins. So it was really important for Steve that we would build a dinghy that had a William Atkins design. So there are two plans here. This one is called Handy Andy, and it is a sailing dinghy. And the other one is called Faye, and it is also a sailing dinghy. Now, they are pretty much the same with one big difference. And the big difference is that Handy Andy is only 8 feet long, and Faye is 10 feet long. Now, this presents a little bit of a problem in that in order for the boat to sit on top of the cabin roof, which would be upside down, there are some parameters that need to be met. So the first parameter is that from the companionway to the mast is just a little bit more than 9 feet. So Steve has asked that the dinghy only be 9 feet in its overall length. Now the second thing is that there is a hatch that is on the top of the cabin roof, and that hatch is so you can get materials in and out of it without having to go through the companionway. So that hatch will be raised up a little bit so that the water will shed off of it, and that hatch then needs to fit inside of the dinghy properly. So that means that between the front seat to the main thwart seat in the center, there needs to be enough space for that hatch to fit up in there. So some other parameters that are not in these plans that Steve would like is that he wants it to be as light and strong as possible. Well, both of these plans, well actually I know that Faye was drawn in 1933. There are no dates on Handy Andy, but given the similarities in the two, I would think that they were drawn very close at the same time. So one of the things about a boat designed in 1933 is that there are a whole bunch of frames that then had cedar planking on it, and then that was covered with a canvas. Now what we're going to do, we use some more modern technology, and that we're going to eliminate all of the frames. Actually, it'll turn out. We're going to eliminate all the frames. We're going to plank it, strip plank it with cedar, and then glass cloth it on both sides. So that's where we're going to get our strength, is from the glass cloth, is why we'll be able to remove all of those frames. Now one of the reasons we're doing that is that way the interior of the boat stays pretty clean. And Steve would like a boat that would be very easy to keep clean by just simply washing it out and dumping the water out. If there's all those little frames in there, that's a place where stuff can get caught. It also is going to add a tremendous amount of weight to the dinghy. And as you can imagine, this is a boat that we're going to have to lift out of the water and up onto the deck and then turn over. And probably a one-person operation to do that. So that's one consideration, is that we're removing all of the frames, and we're going to use cedar and glass cloth. Now we're going to get some of that strength back in that at the we'll put in a bulkhead actually at the fore here, and we'll put a bulkhead at the aft. Now what that will do is be able to create a couple of airtight chambers. Because the other thing that Steve would like is that it be an unsinkable boat. Now what he meant by unsinkable is that if it gets swamped and gets filled with water, it won't go to the ocean floor. So we need a couple of air chambers in there to stop that from happening. Now one of the benefits to doing that, putting bulkheads here, is a couple of things. One, it adds some strength there as though it was a frame. So the other thing is that will give us some storage space in the fore and aft part of the dinghy, that some storage can be put in there. Now the other thing is where the center seat is. Now I think I had mentioned that this is going to be a sailing dinghy. So the sailing dinghy requires a dagger board in it. And the dagger board, in this particular drawing here of Faye, the seat is right here and the center trunk is here. So what we're going to do is move the center trunk back a little bit as we shorten the end here, and then move the seat forward a little so that the centerboard trunk fits exactly where the seat is. And the seat probably will become a little wider. Now in addition to the fore and aft bulkheads, we'll put a bulkhead on each side of that seat so that we'll also have basically some center support in the center of the amidship of the dinghy. So I had mentioned that it will be a sailing dinghy, and I've got the two sail plans for Handy Annie and Faye are here, where Steve is more in favor of Faye's rig, which is a spirit rig. The nice thing about a spirit rig is they come down very easily, and you can wrap the sails around it so you have a nice a nice package for the sail to be stored in. Now, one of the other things that I'll be making in addition to the spars for the sail is I'm going to also make a set of oars for it, and we'll make the oars out of some ash. Steve provided me with a really big, beautiful slab of ash that I'll be able to make some oars out of. So you can see with some of the parameters that I need to work with in either lengthening Handy Andy or shortening Faye, and also some of those constraints with where that center hatch will fit. I'm going to need to draw an entirely new line drawing and essentially end up almost redesigning a new boat. Now the important part here is that it will still be an Atkins-esque boat. It'll still have the lines of an Atkins. Much the way that the Haven that I'm building, that was designed by Joel White, was taken inspiration from the Herrenschaft 12.5 footer. So it's a new boat, but it still has the characteristics of a Herrenschaft. So the same thing will be true with this. It'll be a new boat, but it'll have all of the characteristics of an Atkins designed boat. So there'll be very little bronze needed for the tender. One of the things it will need is a few cleats for the sail plan, and we'll need to have a bronze oar socket for the oar locks. In addition to that, the only other bronze is bronze that Steve has already provided to me, and that is the nameplate off of Victoria. So let me show you that, and I also want to show you a special piece of burled cherry that Steve shared with me that we'll be able to use for the oar sockets. So you can see I've got these really beautiful bronze letters for to spell out Victoria. First I want to show you these pieces of beautiful burled cherry. Steve varnished the other side so you could see how beautiful that comes out. So I'll only need small little pieces in order for those oar sockets to fit in there. But it's really, I think it's really a nice contrast. Now, when I originally had seen these letters, I thought, wow, what a beautiful patina those have. And I had mentioned that to Steve. Well, he's interested in them being polished and clean and brand new. His feeling is that this is a rebirth and that it's a brand new Victoria and that everything should start off pristine and new in order to get started. Now, eventually, it probably will get patinaed like this is, but we'll let time take care of that. So I thought it might be interesting in order to take at least one of them and polish it and see how well it turns out. Now, I often get asked about how you polish bronze. It's pretty simple actually. It's just starting with a heavy grit and working your way finer, just like you would finishing a piece of wood. So I've got a piece of rubber shelf drawer paper here, drawer liner, so it won't slide around on me. Since these have not really have any tooling marks in it, I'm going to start with some 100 or 220 grit sandpaper and basically just get started. So you can see it comes off pretty easily. A quicker way to do this would be to use a sandblaster. Yeah, I don't have a sandblaster. We'll see how this goes. I may take them over to the university and use their sandblaster if it takes very long. Unlike wood, you don't have to worry about a grain in it. In fact, going back and forth different ways, I would call it cross-hatching. The metal will cut a little faster. That's looking pretty good with really not much time at all. So to get the edges, I'm going to use some little files like this. You can see these castings aren't as perfect as what you would think. So I think what I'm going to do is take it over to my buffing wheel and see if I can clean some of that up a little quicker. So what I've got here is this wheel is an expanding wheel. So right now you can see the belt just slides off and on, and then when it starts up, the centrifugal force makes that rubber wheel expand and hold that on there. And these belts come in different grits. So right now I have a 320 grit paper on there. Typically when you're using a grit with a machine, it will cut faster than if it's by hand. So that's why I dropped down to 320 on this. So we'll turn this on. What's nice about it is it's soft and flexible, so you don't dig into it like you would with a typical belt sander. Now we'll see how it does on the surface. Back over here at the bench, you can see there's still some patina in here. So I have these little needle files that, so I'm able to kind of get into that tight area there to clean it up. I cleaned that up pretty good. I've got a variety of sizes, so this little flat spot I can use this small file. And I've got have a little round one. I can get in here where it's got a rounded spot. It looks pretty good. So I'm going to go over it another time with some 220 here and get some of those, get the strokes a little smoother. Now if you didn't have a machine like that and you're doing this by hand, once we got the 220 done, we can then move to a finer grit. And I believe this is either 400 or 600. So in this application, I'm really mostly just worried about the face, because once it's on the boat, the edges will not be nearly as important. Okay, now the last spot are these places where the screws will go, and what I'm going to do is take it over to the drill press and just touch that with a countersink tool, and that should clean all of that up. So one of the last steps, I put a buffing wheel on here, and I've got some buffing compound, which is little fine grits of stuff that's in a wax base. And we just start this and load it up a little bit, and just start buffing. You can see the difference there. Looks pretty good, but I'm going to do one more thing that'll really put a shine on it. So the last thing that I'm going to do, I got a paper towel out here, I'm going to put some Mother's mag and aluminum polish on here that will really put a nice shine on it. So you just take a little dab, put on there. I usually just use another paper towel and start working on it. Looks pretty good. So now all I have to do is the rest of the other letters. Well, that turned out really nice. It's so pretty. Well, some of you are probably wondering, what about the Haven? Where are we at as far as finishing it up? When am I planning on launching it? What's left to be done? Things like that. So basically, the hull is really finished. And in the last episode, I finished all of the spars and masts. Now, there's still quite a few pieces of bronze that I need to cast, and I'll need to wait until Bradley University gets back in session so that I can use their facilities to cast those bronze parts. But in addition to that, some of the things that need to be done is all of the rigging, and the rigging will also include making the sails. So I'm planning on purchasing a sewing machine and sewing all of the sails myself also. Now, as far as when it will be finished, if I had pushed really hard and this new project wasn't on my plate, I probably could have maybe gotten it in the water this year. But it would have been really late in the year, and because it's Carvel planked and needs to take up, it really didn't make sense to force that issue. So I'm going to take my time and do all of those things that I had mentioned, and that way I'll be shooting for a probably a late April, early May launching of the Haven. So as I progress along with the new tender, I'll also be jumping back and forth on the Haven, so you'll see some episodes on that and some on the tender. So thanks for watching, and if you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you've been here for a while, thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you the next time when we're going to start designing the tender for Arabella. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.